Hello, you guys. So today we're still in the book of Revelation, the fall of Babylon, and Revelations chapter 18. I don't know if I've got any. Matter of fact, I need to pay attention to that. Try and do some face that actually is presentable for the front of this, because usually it's me either doing something like that or some other weird face. So anyways, the fall of Babylon announced in verses 1 through 3. It says, "After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." This chapter opens with the phrase, "and after these things," which marks a later time than that of chapter 17. It is declared by the writer John, "I saw another angel come down from heaven," and the phrase "another angel" makes clear that this is a different angel from the one in chapter 17. The angel is described as having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. It is clear that this is literal angel, not Christ in the form of an angel. The term "another" makes clear that this is the same kind as the angel in chapter 17. The fact that the angel has great power and the earth is lightened with his glory leads to the conclusion that the angel is delegated to do a great work for God. The announcement given by the angel, "Babylon is fallen," is fallen. The verb "is fallen," is spoken twice, which indicated a sudden event viewed as completed, though the context would indicate a future event. There are a number of reasons for believing that chapter 18 follows the events of chapter 17, though described in similar terms. The woman who is described in chapter 17 as destroyed is made desolate, naked, and burned with fire by the beast with the 10 horns. From this, it is concluded that the destruction of the harlot is the fall of Babylon in its ecclesiastical or religious sense. This probably occurs at the middle of or near the middle of the week. Here the beast assumes the role of God. The world church is destroyed in favor of a world religion honoring the political dictator. The context seems to indicate that Babylon is viewed here in its political and economic character. The term Babylon. That's my first one. The context seems to indicate that Babylon is viewed here in political and economic character. According to verse 2, it is followed by its becoming the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and cage of every unclean and hateful bird. The threefold description of the inhabitants of fallen Babylon is a reference to fallen angels in their various characteristics as demons and devil spirits, symbolized by the birds. The abandonment of destroyed Babylon to demons is a divine judgment stemming from the utter wickedness of its inhabitants. Babylon, in her political character, has had evil relationships with all nations, described as fornication. In this, they have been led by the rulers, the kings of the earth. This evil association has made the merchants of the earth rich. The nations have prospered as they have abandoned God and sought to accumulate wealth of the world, a call to separation from Babylon. in verses 4 and 5. It says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached into heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities." John hears another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people. God has always called on his people to come out from the world and be separated. God called his people to leave ancient Babylon in Jeremiah the 50th chapter, verses 4 through 9. And also God called Lot to leave out of Sodom before he rained down fire and brimstone on it in Genesis the 19th chapter, verses 15 through 22. God calls for his children to be separated from the world today. In 2 Corinthians the 6th chapter, verse 17, "Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you." The purpose of the calling for his people to leave Babylon was twofold. By separation from her, they will not be partakers of her sins. In verse 4, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins." By separation from her, they will not have her plagues inflicted on them. Verse 4, "And that ye receive not of her plagues." The sins of Babylon are declared to reach unto heaven. In verse 5, the Tower of Babel may not have literally reached to heaven, but the sins of Babylon reached into heaven. The fact that her sins have piled one on the other until they have reached heaven, just as brick in a building is laid one on top of the other, so is the sins of Babylon. The indictment against Babylon. Verses 6 through 8. "Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit as a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is Lord God who judges her." In keeping with the greatness of her sin, the voice from heaven calls for her to be rewarded according as she has dealt with people of God. The verb reward her means to pay a debt or to give back that which is due. According to the demand of the voice, the law of the harvest is called for. One always reaps more than sown. Galatians the 6th chapter, verse 7. In keeping with the principle, the cup of iniquity which Babylon filled is now to be filled with the measure of her judgment. And it's reaping what it is that you sow. Her willful sin against God is now to be rewarded with torment and sorrow. The torment refers to the trial by torture with resulting mental anguish and grief. Her wishful thinking, in which she said, I sit a queen and am now a widow and shall see no sorrow, is going to be rewarded by sudden destruction from the Lord. According to verse 8, her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famines, resulting in her utter destruction by fire. The lament of the kings of the earth. In verses 9 through 10 of the 18th chapter, it says, And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Allah, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. These kings are not the 10 kings of chapter 17, verses 12 through 16, that destroyed the harlot, but a much wider number, the kings of the earth. These kings who participated in the wickedness and wealth of her see the destruction and bewail her and lament for her. The time is in the last part of the tribulation and is a plague from God just before the second coming of Christ. The lament of the kings over Babylon is most forceful by the use of the clause, that great city Babylon, that mighty city. It was great in its extent of power and accomplishment, mighty in the strength of its rule. In spite of its greatness and strength, it's nevertheless falls in 1 hour. No power is equal to God's power. Babylon rebuilt. So believe that ancient Babylon is to be rebuilt as the capital of the world empire in the Great Tribulation period. Others identify Babylon as Rome, the seat of the apostate church, as described by the seven mountains in chapter 17, verse 9, and also the political city as described elsewhere, referred to a lesson on chapter 17. Those who deny that Babylon will be rebuilt to do so on the principle that the prophecy of the destruction refers to the ecclesiastical and political powers symbolized in Babylon, but not in the actual city. The twofold lament involved: bewail, literally to beat the breast. Their torment will be so great that they will beat their breasts while they watch its burning. To lament, their vocal cry, alas, alas. A better translation of the word would be woe, woe. It is much more forceful word than the English word alas. And we know that any time that woe, woe is used in the Bible, that's significant. Take and stop and pay attention. There's a warning that's coming. The lament of the merchants of the earth in verses 11 through 19 says, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet, all thine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and the beast, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and the souls of men, and the fruits that thy soul lusteth after departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company and the ships and sailors, and as they many trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. The economic character of the city is indicated in the fact that the merchants weep and mourn for her. The merchandise is itemized, and they break down, wealth and luxury, gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fabrics used in the clothing composed of fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet, rich furnishings, and it talks about all the different types of woods and marble and ivory, the use of vessels made of ivory, brass, and iron and marble. In verse 13, expensive perfumes are listed, spices and perfumes, cinnamon and odors, perfumes and ointments and frankincense, the abundance of food, wine and oil, fine flour, wheat and cattle and sheep, means of transportation employed by the wealthy, horses and chariots, the servants for the rich, and the slaves and the souls of men. And verse 14 tells of the swift removal of all the precious possessions described, the fruit that the soul lusteth after, and all the things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee. The inhabitants of Babylon addressed as thou are no longer able to find those things, and thou shalt find them no more at all. Like the kings of the earth, the merchants also fear to go near the city. In verses 15 through 16, rejoicing in heaven over the fall of Babylon. In verse 20, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. In contrast to the grief by the world rulers and merchants by the destruction of Babylon, the heavens and the holy apostles and prophets rejoice at her destruction. The rejoicing is not over the sufferings and pain that has ended, and the one who caused it is destroyed. Rejoicing because righteousness has been met out the expression, for God hath avenged. Literally, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. This is bringing to bear the righteous recompense for the martyrdom of saints upon Babylon. It is another case where the righteous triumph and victory following the suffering. In 2 Corinthians, the 2nd chapter, verse 14, it says, Now thanks be to God, which always causeth us to triumph in Christ, and maketh manifest the Savior of his knowledge by us in every place. The utter destruction of Babylon, verse 21 through 24, it says, And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with the violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman or whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchandise were the great men of the earth. For by the sorceries were all nations deceived, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth. The mighty angel casting the great millstone into the sea, portraying the violent downfall of the great city. A similar prophecy is found in Jeremiah, the 51st chapter, verses 61 through 64. The ultimate end of Babylon will be accomplished by God's judgment at the end of the tribulation. She will go down as a great millstone cast into the sea, never to rise again. The activity in the great city is silent forever. Entertainment, both religious and political, is silent forever. The voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters. In like manner, the lights of the city are out. The lights of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. No longer do its streets ring with voice of the wedding, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all. Verse 23 and 24 list a summary of the extent of Babylon's sin and greatness. Her merchants were the great men of the earth. The greatness of Babylon reached all great men of the earth. All nations were deceived by the sorceries, witchcraft, and magic enchantment. Were all nations deceived. Babylon is declared to be guilty of the blood of the prophets and saints and all that were slain among the earth. When the description of the fall of Babylon in chapter 17 and 18, the way is clear for the second coming of Christ and the establishment of his glorious kingdom. And I don't know, I know that the darkness of seeing this and what you need to understand is the light that's being shined down on sin. There's judgment that's coming, and this judgment is concluded here. And you to me, you see this because what's coming next week is the second coming of Christ that Brother Phil is going to be working on with chapter 19, and that's so exciting. I don't know if you're like me, but I look forward to God coming. There's things that are happening right now that are wicked in our world, and we see those things happening and they're wicked. But understand that it's nothing in comparison to what's going to be taking place during this time period. This time period is going to be a time of just complete upheaval of everything that you see that's right, everything that you see that is established as being righteous. Satan is going to try and rip those things apart, one thing after another, and understand that God is coming and he is going to take and bring judgment with him. I hope that you are ready. I hope that you have a relationship with God and that you are looking forward to his return. I love you guys, and I look forward to, we're coming to a conclusion of Revelation as far as our study. We're going to be coming up on Genesis, and I hope that you're reaching out to friends around you. Love you. You guys have a great week.